Welcome back, everybody. Let's have a chat now about the challenges of traditional technology teams. This can help you understand why we need things like DevOps if we've already got something like Agile that we could be using within our software teams. So we'll start off by talking about who is who. What sort of team members do we need to worry about? What different departments are there? And who is going to be involved in the release of software to our users? We'll then talk about how these teams can be isolated and what sort of challenges this can present. Altogether, this lesson is going to help you to understand the progression of traditional project management methodologies through to Agile, and then from Agile through to complementary practices such as DevOps. Together, this will help you understand what sort of ways we can approach modern software development and the types of challenges that we're trying to overcome. So first things first, let's have a chat about the different members involved in the release of software to users. Let's say you're building an Ausimart web store. We know, of course, that there's going to have to be a development team that is involved with the development of the actual solution code used to create the Ausimart web store. And we, of course, are going to have some users that are accessing that application. Now, what we can sometimes forget about is the fact that all of this runs on some underlying infrastructure, and we need a team to manage that infrastructure as well. Now, this is referred to as the IT operations team, or the ops team for short. So we've got these different teams and these different people, and they each have their own responsibilities. Let's just drive a bit deeper in terms of what this might look like when the development team is working on newer features for our application. So what we can actually have happen is the development team is going to work together very closely with the application users. Maybe you are using the Agile methodology, and so the development team and the users collaborate very closely and try and release and work on features on very short time intervals, like a 4-week sprint, for example. Now, what can happen is the IT ops team can be left completely out of this picture. And so you've got the development team, they're working closely with the users, and maybe they go and build some new functionality that they want to put in front of the users nice and quickly, like they would with an Agile. So they generate some version 2 deployment files, and they give that to the IT operations team. Now, this can commonly be referred to as throwing it over the fence, because sometimes within some organizations, the development team might be working really closely with the application users. They've got their own schedules, their own processes, and when they're ready to go, they want that ready to go right now. So they throw it over the fence to the IT ops team and they say, hey, we need version 2 up and online right away. So the IT ops team, well, they might have to manually go ahead and create some new application infrastructure. And they might have to go and manually take all of those version 2 assets, the deployment files, whatever static files they might have, maybe some manual configuration tasks they need to complete. They're going to do all the things that they need to get version 2 online. And then they'll have to cut over from version 1 to version 2. And at some stage, they'll have to decommission the old infrastructure. And of course, they'll need to make sure that the new infrastructure is all backed up, maintained, monitored, and all the other sorts of things that the IT ops team is responsible for. Now, whilst they're still working through that, perhaps the development team has already finished another sprint. They've got version 3 ready to go. They throw it over the fence again, and the IT ops team is saying, hey, you need to slow down. We are really busy. We've got other projects that we are working on. We haven't yet maybe finished some of the stuff we need to do for the new version 2 infrastructure. But anyway, however they can, they schedule some overtime. They work really hard. They get some new infrastructure online. They perform all the tasks they need to. They manually get that version 3 up and online, and they schedule in a cutover from the version 2 solution. So this is the sort of issues that we can face when we're talking about traditional technology teams. The idea that even though we've said we're going to be very agile and work very closely with our users and provide a more collaborative approach to software development, well, if the IT ops team is left out of that picture, you can see how there might be issues. And certainly if we're performing a range of manual tasks to actually deploy, monitor, configure, and get everything up and running, there can be a lot of different delays. But wait, because there's actually more. We have more than just our development team members, our users, and our IT ops team that we need to worry about. We can actually have other departments like quality assurance. Hopefully that is something that is being used. Quality assurance might be asked by the development team to go and test the application, make sure there are no issues, no errors, there is no problems with the functions and features provided by the application, before they give the development team the go ahead to have this solution deployed. But part of the problem, once again, is that this QA team is an entirely separate team. They are siloed. They are separate from the dev team and from the ops team. They'll have their own goals, their own priorities, and their own tools and processes that they are using separate from the other teams. So once they do finally finish the testing and they approve that for the development team, maybe the development team's then going to say, please deploy to the ops team. And as we've already spoken about, they're a separate team with their own goals, priorities, and processes as well. And we haven't even spoken about security, because traditionally, security was even more of an afterthought than the collaboration between these three teams. So this is some of the challenges that we can face with traditional organizations that are developing software solutions. The idea that even though we might have tried to implement something like Agile through Scrum or Lean or whatever it might be, if we have separate teams that are all working with their own processes, tools, and goals, then things just aren't going to match up. So what does that look like in practice? Well, we can see, for example, that we might have the dev team that's working on our web application. They want the QA team to go ahead and test it. But what if the QA team's working on an entirely separate application for maybe the finance department? Even though the dev team is trying to use things like 4-week sprints, they're still going to have to wait because the QA team is doing their own thing. So when the QA team is ready, they can go ahead and perform the testing, and then they're going to have to pass it on to the ops team. But what if the ops team is already busy deploying the finance application? There's going to be even more delays. So these delays can just keep on adding up together and together. And even though you've tried to implement Agile, you're still going to have angry users. So these are some of the challenges that we saw before the creation of DevOps. The idea that all of these teams can be separate, and even if we were trying to follow Agile best practices, we were still seeing large delays with the actual release of our solution to our users. And in part, that can be because these teams were entirely separated and isolated, but also because there's typically been a lot of manual effort that's been involved in setting up infrastructure, deploying software, configuring software, and doing all that we need to do to cut over that software and actually release it to our end users. All of this separation, segregation, and manual processes has also resulted in software that is found to be, lower quality. There can be much more bugs because if you've got a range of different manual processes and you don't have much collaboration between your different teams, maybe you're testing in different environments, or maybe you've just got human error that's being introduced as part of the manual processes that are used through deployment. And if you do experience some issues, then the whole fact that you've got these separate, isolated teams has been seen to create an us and them culture, which means if you do have an outage, you're probably going to spend more time trying to lay blame than you are actually trying to get the solution online for your users. So everybody, these are some of the challenges that we've been facing with the structure of traditional technology teams, the way that they work together, the way that they perform manual tasks, and perhaps even some issues with the culture. And of course, as we move on to learn more about DevOps, we're going to hope that we can see technologies, processes, tools, and different mindsets that can help us to overcome these challenges and ultimately release higher quality features to our users faster. So thanks for joining me, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it, and that's a wrap.